Hello YouTube, this is Mahadeva Thunder Wizard. Alright, so this will certainly prove to be a controversial video, and I'm not afraid of controversy. But I am going to do everything in my power to focus on facts and not on conjecture. And I'm not here to assassinate anybody's character. So before, if whether you're new to my channel or not, before you start typing in your comments about this, I want you to listen to what I have to say. And, you're free to, of course, come to your own conclusions. And I'd like for you to, most importantly, to listen to yourself. This is what is most important. If you have a strong emotional reaction to just even the clickbait title, it is a total clickbait title, I want to get views. If you have a strong emotional reaction to just the title itself, I want you to sit with that. So let's briefly go over what is, I think, the most important fundamental lesson that I want to bring in this topic, which is critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Critical thinking is the ability to determine the truth of any idea that is being presented to you or that comes from within you. The most important thing, the first rule of critical thinking is everybody, every single human being on the planet, including me right now, including you, everybody has emotional agendas. In other words, you don't do anything unless there's some kind of emotional impetus or payoff. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way we're set up. But when you have a very strong emotional agenda or emotional attachment to something, it has the potential to blind you to the truth. And it has the potential to either allow you to accept ideas and theories that are being given to you, or it may push you away from the truth because you may not like what you're hearing. So the first thing a critical thinker does is say, I have emotional reactions to things, and before I make any final conclusion on something, I need to first check with myself and see, do I have a strong emotional reaction for or against what is being presented? Because that means you have to stop and go, okay, I have to make sure that my emotions aren't dictating my beliefs. So I want you to do that. I want you're free at the end of this to decide whether or not you agree or disagree. And you can have whatever opinion you want about me personally, that's fine. But this is really about you. And my goal for this is to help people, That's my goal. And so, why am I talking about David Icke? Well, first thing that has happened is let's talk about the fact that he has been banned. He has been banned by YouTube, or at least one of his channels has been banned by YouTube, and his Facebook account has been banned. And people are, up in arms on that. And there is a worthwhile discussion about freedom of speech. I welcome that. I'm not taking a position one way or another, but I am going to tell you what the reasons are. The reasons is that Facebook Facebook has been under a lot of scrutiny lately, as you know. Major spotlight on them for fake news. They have not been monitoring information that has been planted in there that has been fake, that could potentially have been helpful to China and Russia and others. So there's a lot of scrutiny on that, a lot of scrutiny on them taking people's information and all that kind of thing. So they're under the gun. So they have to make sure that they don't break any laws, whether those laws are justified or not. I'm just saying they're just trying to stay afloat and not get shut down. So that they have to be extra careful. And so even if we make the conclusion that Facebook is censoring them, whether that's true or not, That's the reason why. So I don't want you to look into something sinister like that. Facebook is trying to avoid too much government scrutiny. Same thing with YouTube. YouTube has to do that for themselves. Now, why would they target David Icke? Because David Icke has been publicly on his Facebook and on his YouTube account been promoting the idea that the COVID-19 pandemic is a hoax. And so because the majority opinion, basically the world, but especially governments, is that this is a real thing, that actually can be, in their mind, I'm not saying right or wrong, in their mind, it means that when somebody's promoting that who has power, by the way, anybody, if I were to promote that, I would get shut down also. I'm not promoting that, so I'm safe, at least on that account. So that's why he's been shut down, is because he has been saying that COVID-19 pandemic is a hoax, and there are people who could consider that to be dangerous, because if enough people hear it, and again, the theory is, the lockdown and the social distancing and those measures are designed to starve the virus out so that we can get rid of it. Now, we can debate whether or not that is the right thing to do. I'm just telling you the reasoning behind it. So that's why he got shut down. You want to come up with other, conspiracy theories, I can't stop you with that, but that's why. Let's take a look at this guy. So again, I want you to take a look at your emotions about him, for or against. I want you, especially if you're younger, if you're, let's say 25 years or younger and you're a follower of David Icke, I want you to take a look at his history. Because ironically, he's somebody who has promoted the idea that rich, powerful people and celebrities are aliens, are hybrid, they're reptilian overlords. And he himself has been a celebrity most of his life. So if you don't know anything about his personal history, let me take a look at what's available, what I could find on the guy. And what I found was that he was born in humble circumstances in somewhere in England, I believe, in the UK, and he became a soccer star, a football star, and then he had to leave his sports career because he started getting rheumatoid arthritis, and you can see this in some of his early. I don't know what's happened since then. In some of his early interviews, you can see his hands, his fingers are starting to curve, which means that he's getting rheumatoid arthritis at a very early age. And so that killed his sports career. And then he went into conservation. And he was, I don't even know how high he was. Let me see if I can find out. But he was in the Green Party. And so he got involved in politics, and he was really working towards the environment. Now that's going to be important because one of his most recent conspiracy theories seems to be in direct conflict with this idea, and I'll get to that in a second. But he was in the Green Party, and I'm not really sure. But he seemed to have a lot of power. I don't know if he was elected to some post. I think he was elected to some post in the Green Party. I'm very quickly trying to look for that, and I'm not finding it. But in any case, he was a celebrity within the political Green Party, and then I believe it was in when was it? 1990. Was it 90 or 90? Yeah, 1990. He decided that he was going to leave the Green Party, and it was a big deal. Now, bear in mind, he was a sportscaster. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. He was a soccer star, and then he had a very successful career as a sportscaster. So that means he was a household name in Britain. Everybody in Britain knew who this guy was. He was a celebrity. So it wasn't like he came out of nowhere and he's just this guy he was a celebrity. And so he already had a huge platform. He could have said anything and he would have had, all of Britain looking at him and, a lot of the world looking at him, waiting to hear what he had to say. So in 1990, he left the Green Party, and it was a big deal, standing ovation when he made the speech. And he made the speech basically saying that he was going to start some, he was going to be the focus of a controversy. And so because of that, and to his credit, he had to leave the Green Party. So I applaud him for that. And then he did a press conference. So when he resigned from the Green Party, during a party conference, telling him he was going to be the center of a tremendous and increasing controversy, he got a standing ovation, and then he had a press conference. And at the press conference, he declared himself to be a son of the Godhead. All right, we'll talk about that in a second. He then began to tell reporters that the world was going to end in 1997. Okay, so it's important. If you believe this guy has very truthful, practical information, then you owe it to yourself to look at this. He told everybody the world was going to end in 1997. He said that it was going to be preceded by a hurricane around the Gulf of Mexico and New Orleans. He said there was going to be eruptions in Cuba, disruption in China, a hurricane in Derry, so a hurricane, off the coast of the UK, and an earthquake on the Isle of Arran, which is Scotland. Okay? Then he went on to say that he was being given this information by voices and automatic writing. So if you don't know what automatic writing is, it's when you take a pen and you just start scribbling, and then you just let, your unconscious mind, write things out. And it's a way that people believe they can channel information from, the other side, right? So anyway, this is how he started getting his information. His information that one of the things he said is Los Angeles would become an island in 1997. Bear in mind, he's saying that this is going to happen in 1997. And that New Zealand would disappear, and that the cliffs of Kent would be underwater by Christmas. So, let's go over this. He had a press conference where he said he was the son of the Godhead, or a son of the Godhead, and that the world was going to end in 1997, and that there was going to be all kinds of horrible natural disasters, including Los Angeles would become an island, New Zealand would disappear. Okay, none of those things have happened. Let's just be clear. It's now 2020. It's now 23 years later. None of those things have happened as of yet. So then he went on to do an interview on a talk show called the Wogan Show. Now I watched this. I watched this the whole interview because, I read this stuff and it's very incendiary and all that, but I wanted to hear him talk about it because I know of some of the things he teaches, and I wanted to see if he was teaching those things from the very beginning. As it turns out, he wasn't. So the whole idea of the reptilians and none of that, he didn't mention any of that in his first appearance as this spiritual teacher, this channeler. What he did do, and you can watch it for yourself, you can find it all over the place, but you can find it on YouTube. He claimed that basically that he was the reincarnation of Jesus. Now, he didn't say it in those words, but he likened himself to Jesus. And he talked about the Godhead. Now, in this, what I did find in this interview was a consistent theme there with what he teaches then and what he teaches now. There is a consistent theme. He has built upon and expanded a central theme. So that part is, I guess, adds to his credibility in terms of him staying consistent. But the specifics of how it changed, I think, are important to note. So what he did was he likened himself to Jesus, and when asked about the Godhead, What he did was he took the same idea of dualism, that there's God and the devil. He took those two same ideas and basically just expounded on it. Now, this is important. He magnified it. And I'm going to talk about why that's important later. But basically, it was the same thing as the biblical. He changed a couple of words here and there, tried to make it sound a little different, but it really wasn't any different. He said that there was the Godhead. Now, he was clear that the Godhead was not a plurality of gods, which is what the Godhead kind of implies. But he said that it was a massive spirit. That's important. He didn't just, God, as it had already been introduced through Christianity, was already omnipotent, omniscient, and infinite. So you can't get bigger than that. But he was basically doing that, and he's very articulate. And he was saying that the Godhead was this massive spirit. And he claimed that the Godhead was responsible for kindness and love and positivity and for creation. And he said that he was a son of the Godhead. And then again, in multiple times in that, he likens himself to Jesus. Now, he then volunteered some information later on in the interview, which I found very interesting, which he claimed, which actually has no bearing in the biblical text. There's nothing in the biblical text that agrees with him on this. But he claimed that Jesus didn't know who he was until later in life. That's not true. I mean, the scriptures do not, the New Testament, I shouldn't call them scriptures, but the New Testament does not say that. But the New Testament doesn't really say one way or the other. He just announces who he is at some point. So that's not true, but he was obviously saying that he had now come to realize who he was, and he was clearly aligning himself with Jesus and setting up so that other people could say that he was the second coming of Jesus. And then he could then say, well, I didn't say that, but. That's a very typical thing that teachers do. Now, I have said very clearly from the beginning, any teacher that claims to be anything more than human or allows other people to claim for them that they are anything other than human is either a fraud or deluded or both. I've always said that. So it's very clear from that interview, he is setting himself up to allow other people, if they chose to, in other words, if the message hit well, that other people could then say he was the second coming of Jesus, and then he could use it however he wanted. Now, he didn't deny any of that. In fact, he likened himself to Jesus multiple times. And that interview was disastrous for him. They laughed at him. During the interview, he was laughed at. The whole, just uproariously, they were laughing at him. I didn't get to the rest of his message. So he believed in this godhood of light that was made of light, and that there was this dark entity or essence which he likened to Lucifer. Again, he took the same idea of the biblical God and devil, and with the way he talked about it, he basically tried to magnify it so he could separate himself from it but still use it and put himself into that narrative. But basically that's all it was. There was no mention of reptilians, there was no mention of aliens. The theme that was the same then that is now was that he believed that the God of light was love and light and all the things that are good. He said that the entity of darkness, or Lucifer, had been in control of this world for 12,000 years. So same kind of setup where you have evil, some kind of evil overlord that is victimizing the human race, and that he was representative of the light and of love. The same thing, one of the things that is consistent is that he said that this negative being of darkness was fomenting negativity, anger, hate, judgment, wars. And he mentioned children at least 2 or 3 times. And he got very emotional when he talked about the victimization of children. And so those things are the same. He still does that now. That's very, that's a big theme in reptilian conspiracy theories, is that the reptilians sacrifice children, do blood sacrifice, that there's pedophilia and all kinds of horrible things done to children. And if you remember Pizzagate, the Pizzagate guy may not have known that he was being influenced by David Icke, but remember Pizzagate? There was a guy who went to a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. with a gun, demanding that he have entrance to the underground tunnels where Hillary Clinton and others were sacrificing children, and there was a pedophilia ring. Do you remember that? This is a connection here, because David Icke definitely talks about that all the time. If you go on his website, he has numerous, more than you can count, articles and blogs about the victimization of children. That's a big theme with him, and that was there in the beginning. So the thing that was in the beginning was the victimization of children, that there was some dark overlord that has been controlling the earth, that creates negativity and then feeds off of that negativity. Now that has been expanded into the reptilians, but he didn't say that in the beginning. He said it was Lucifer. And that there was this Godhead, this being of light, that even though it was the creator, somehow it wasn't in control of this world, and this dark entity was. And that he obviously was representing himself as this channel of the Godhead, and likening himself to Jesus. So that's important to know, that he likened himself to Jesus, claimed to be a son of the Godhead, and he made all of these predictions that never came true, not one of them. Not one of these predictions came true. He got them through very simple techniques that you and I can do. He claimed to have heard voices which told him these things, and he was doing automatic writing. So automatic writing, I don't have anything for or against it. Here's what you need to understand about how these kinds of psychic things work, if you choose to believe it. Being a shaman and being somebody who, I am open to those kinds of things. As you know, I'm very, I only teach things that I can verify. Even if I get a vision, or if I get a strong feeling or something like that, I always verify it before I teach it. Because you have 3 selves. You have your higher self, your lower self, and your middle self. Your lower self is your unconscious and your subconscious mind. If somebody is conscious, meaning that they do not have any unresolved childhood issues, or unresolved emotional or psychological issues, which we all do. I'm not claiming to be, fully enlightened and fully clear. I'm as human as the next person. That's why whenever I have a dream or a vision, I don't immediately come on and say, this is the truth. Sometimes I'll come on and share things that I've gotten, but I always make sure it's stuff that doesn't have, that will only help people. Even if it's not accurate, will this information be helpful to people? That's the main thing. Is it helpful? But outside of that, if I can verify it through historical things or other things, then I'll say I got this download and here's what I learned. But the rest of the time, I go, okay, I have no idea if that's my unconscious narcissism or my fears or my hopes or dreams or fantasies. I don't know any of that yet, regardless of how empowered I may feel. So just because he sat there and did automatic writing, and that said there was going to be an earthquake, and that New Zealand was going to sink, and that Los Angeles was going to become an island, which, by the way, you need to know that was, back then, that was a meme of Los Angeles becoming an island. That was something that was already in, he was taking from things that were already in. It wasn't like he just came up with that and that was some weird brand new thing. People have been saying that for years because of the earthquakes in California. The truth of the matter is, scientifically, is that if there was an earthquake of that magnitude, Los Angeles would not become an island, it would sink. Because Los Angeles is on a floodplain. and there's this thing called liquefaction. So there's this huge, like, sand, where places that I lived in Southern California, in the South Bay, Los Angeles South Bay, there was worries that if a big earthquake came, that the whole city would sink into the sand. Because what happens is when the earthquake shakes the ground, the water from the ocean sinks in, and the water from the water table rises up, and the sand turns into quicksand. So it was a really big deal. There was this real big fear that, not that Los Angeles would become an island, but that it would sink. So, there's the science behind that isn't there. And the point is, it's clear he was drawing on things that were already in vogue at the time. And my point that I'm trying to make is that, automatic writing and hearing voices, any one of us could have that experience. And it is a really good way to find out what's in your unconscious. So if you have unconscious fantasies, for instance, if somebody has insecurity, because the opposite of insecurity is narcissism. If somebody has major insecurity, they could respond with that on an unconscious level by saying that they're the son of God. If that comes up, like if you go to a therapist and that comes up, then you start talking about your insecurities. But you have to be willing to look at yourself. So there's no critical thinking. Whatever comes to him, he just spouts it out there. And in this case, in the beginning, he was completely wrong in terms of all of his predictions. So the other thing you need to know. Now, let's talk about the reptilian aspect. So the reptilian aspect of David Icke is... I've been trying to avoid looking at all the comments because I know the comments are probably blowing up right now. Let's take a look at the reptilian aspect. Now, in order to understand what David Icke teaches about reptilians, we have to go back to 1968. 1968, I know because I was alive. I was a little kid, but I was alive, and I remember seeing these things on the bookshelf, and I remember in the 70s, because by the time, it gets onto TV, it's already been through the theaters, and it's, but I remember seeing in the 70s the documentary Chariots of the Gods. So there was a book that was written by Erich von Däniken. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it was called Chariots of the Gods. And in that book, he does this pseudo-scientific analysis of things like the pyramids and those big desert glyphs in South America, and other things like monoliths and Stonehenge and things like that. And he basically says that these had to have been created by alien astronauts, and that it's just pseudoscience. It's just looking at pictures and go, oh, that kind of looks like a spaceship, and and taking mythology and saying, well, this is really talking about primitive human beings seeing alien astronauts for the first time, and they're worshiping them as gods. It's conjecture. I mean, there's nothing. I can't say it's false, but it's pure conjecture. So that was in 1968. Now, then there was Zecharia Sitchin in 1976. Now, Zecharia Sitchin came out with a book, I believe, in 1976 called The 12th Planet. Zecharia Sitchin was an economist, I believe. He had no training. There's been nobody's been able to find out that he's had any training in ancient languages. And he started giving translations of the Sumerian mythology. And the gods in Sumerian mythology are called the Anunnaki. So he, in those books, and he wrote a bunch of books after that, where he did some pseudo-linguistical translations and started trying to show from Sumerian mythology that human beings are the result of alien proto-human, I think it was, anyway, a proto-human. and that this hybridization, that they were creating a slave race to mine gold. And he goes on to say that in their planet of Nibiru, their home planet of Nibiru, that they needed gold in the atmosphere for some reason that doesn't really make any sense to anybody. In any case, this guy started this whole thing about the Anunnaki and all of that. So when you read David Icke is clearly getting all of this from these two authors, from Eric von Daniken and Zecharia Sitchin. Then he's expanded on that. So the one thing that he's done is he from the beginning, he takes existent mythology and tries to expand upon it. Now he's very good at this. What makes, and now I'm going to give you my take on why he's so influential. The reason why he's so influential is because from the beginning what he does is he presents himself as a protector of humans, especially children. This is a huge theme. I know nothing about the man, just as somebody, from, my experience in life, it makes me wonder if he was perhaps abused. One of the things that was coincidental, which may or may not mean anything, but that right before he did his press conference, his father died. So it makes me wonder, what was his relationship with his father? Now, again, I don't know. I don't have it. That's just me thinking out loud. But he definitely seems to have an issue with children being abused. And he champions them. And he gets very emotional about it. Now, I want to read something from one of my followers. I'm not going to give out her name. This happens on my channel. Again, if you make a comment on my channel, I assume that you are willing to discuss it. Now, I'm not going to give this person's name. I'm not interested in doing that. But what this person says is actually very important. I lost the page here. I got to find it, so give me a second. And what this person says is they're making an argument, because I had said in one of my recent videos, I believe it was this one, I can't remember. Let me see, which one was it? I made the argument that, it was this one. I made the argument that
I found a
at that time I had watched an interview with David Icke, and I watched him for about 10 minutes, and he was going off about what they were doing and what they are doing to us, and he was getting very emotional about it. But he's very articulate. Bear in mind, he's not just like flipping out. He's very articulate, and he gets very passionate, and he's very engaging. But I realized at the end of that 10 minutes, he hadn't said anything. He had said they're doing it, and then he said, and we have proof, and he said that 3 or 4 times, we have proof that they are doing these horrible things, but he didn't actually say anything. So my point in that video was that it's very easy for somebody, if they're already predisposed, if they themselves feel victimized, if they themselves were in fact victimized as a child, if they need somebody to champion for them, and he comes along and he's very articulate and he gives out pseudoscience and he gives out pseudo evidence, and somebody who isn't educated, who doesn't have critical thinking but has this strong emotional need to be defended from, mom and dad or whoever, or just the feeling, if you have this feeling that they're doing it to you and you don't know who they are, this guy comes along who is very charismatic, who's very influential, who's very convincing and very dynamic and very engaging, and he starts voicing the feelings that you have and putting words to it. You're going to want to follow him. You're not going to follow him because he's telling you the truth. You're going to want to follow him because he's tapping into the unresolved feelings within you and making you feel like he can protect you. Of course, this is all going to be happening on an unconscious level. Now, somebody did get into it with me, didn't get into an argument, but wanted to defend David Icke. And I'm going to just focus on what this person said which I thought was very indicative, which reveals that people are not responding to David Icke out of rational critical thinking. They're responding to him out of their emotional agendas, and it's blinding them so much so that they don't even want to know the truth. And I'm going to get into, at the end, I'm going to make the argument that I think that David Icke is potentially a dangerous person, and because he has the power to have people take actions that can be destructive to the health and safety of others. And I'm going to share that. I don't think he's trying to do that. I don't think that's his intention. But I think that, any actions that are taken without factual knowledge and without critical thinking, any major actions, on a global level or on a societal level, has the potential to be dangerous. And so we need to scrutinize who people are and what they say. If they're making claims that promote people to take actions that can be influential in our society, we at the very least need to examine that. So let's see if I can find it here. I'm going to look for it. What I'm looking for is where this person talks about, here it is, why this person is attracted to David Icke and why this person follows David Icke. Again, I'm not going to give away any names. This person is making a defense for him saying that he was son of the Godhead, which again, it wasn't really a rational defense. I'm not going to get into that. This person says, I guess my attachment is because he has come to the same conclusions as I have. Again, not saying what those conclusions are. And I felt validated. That's important. This person is clear, and to their credit, they're conscious. I guess my attachment to him is because he has come to the same conclusions as I have, and I felt validated. Also, I admire him for being brave enough to stand up for his convictions and what he knows is true in the face of the powers that be who don't want people to know the truth. Now, again, those are all assumptions, all kinds of assumptions. And again, it's very general. There's nothing specific. It's a general feeling that they are doing it, the powers that be, etc., etc., etc. And here is somebody who is putting voice to my feelings, and it makes me feel validated, therefore I'm going to follow him. That is, a critical thinker goes, wow, I'm having a really strong emotional reaction. I feel a really strong desire to follow this person. That doesn't mean what they're saying is factual. Just because you have a feeling, just because they're stating something that makes you feel like you're being defended. Again, he appeals to people who feel powerless, that he is standing up to them. And in my experience, the vast majority of people who follow this are people who are uneducated, who do not have critical thinking, and the vast majority of them that I know of have had tragic, traumatic childhood experiences. They're usually people who are on the bottom tier of the financial, aspect. They don't have the ability to create income for themselves, so they're already in that space of feeling, under the gun. And from what I understand, and I haven't verified this, but it probably makes sense. 4% of people in the United States believe David Icke. They believe everything that he says. That's 4%. That's a lot of people. And then there's a greater percent, and this is where the danger is. There's a greater percentage of people who may not even know who David Icke is or know anything about the reptilians, but they buy into his conspiracy theories. The theories that, there is a cabal, there is a deep state, there is the elite, all those, that there's some level of people who are out of reach, who are behind the shadows, who have all of the power and all of the money, and they are doing it to us. And so that's, I think, what makes him dangerous. So when he comes on and says that the pandemic is a hoax, that becomes dangerous, because then there's 10% of the population more. I'm being conservative. I think it's more than that, who will automatically, because they have an emotional attachment to the idea of somebody pointing out that they're doing it to us, and here's another way that they're doing it, without even looking at it or analyzing it, they immediately, from their need to feel validated as victims, will buy into it. Why is that important? Because if the pandemic is real, then we need to be looking at actions that we should be taking based on science, not on your feelings. And that's the problem. So again, I'm not making an argument one way or the other. What I've seen is that in places like New Zealand and Australia, where there's a smaller population and you have control of the borders and you get on it very quickly, they're starving the virus out. Now, that can't be done in the United States now. That's impossible. The United States has it, and which means the world has it. So, you can't starve it out now. So then there's a really valid argument about whether or not to continue with a lockdown or just to let the population get saturated with it, which brings up other issues about a vaccine. And now, again, somebody who has a conspiratorial mindset can say, oh, they're doing it so that they can introduce a vaccine. And if they have a vaccine, then they're going to put nanobots into your body, and then they're going to control you. Again, with no data behind it, with not even an understanding of what nanotechnology is in vaccines. There's a difference between nanotechnology in robots and nanotechnology in vaccines. I've already talked about that. Again, I haven't taken a stand because I don't have enough information, so I'm not going to take a stand. But I'm sure as hell going to use critical thinking to come to the conclusion. I mean, the thought of it really frightens me. The thought of taking a vaccine that might make me sick, it's impossible. We don't have the technology for somebody to use a vaccine to track us, unless they put in some actual underneath the skin kind of thing, which is another possibility. In order to, you might need to have something under your skin that has a barcode on it that people can scan and see if you've been vaccinated. Those are all real fears, and those there's arguments for and against that. But I'm not going to let my fears dictate what I conclude about those things. So he's dangerous in that way, in that he has such an influence on people that without any critical thinking or without any research, they buy into his emotional thing, which is that they're doing it to you. And I think it's important to understand his penchant for wanting to defend helpless children from abusers. This has been a theme from the beginning, which tells me that this is a psychological issue he has. This is a projection he has. Now, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with defending helpless children. I'm all for that. But when you start, having scenarios where you have Pizzagate, where a guy with a gun goes into a pizza parlor looking for the underground caverns where Hillary Clinton is sacrificing and committing pedophilia, that is a problem. Because of that, it can motivate people to do that. Now, David Icke is very brilliant in that he will throw these things out and yet distance himself by saying, but I don't promote any kind of violence. That's not a responsible way to look at it, because people are going to respond from their highly charged emotional responses, especially when you believe that there are the devil himself through aliens living on Nibiru who are creating this negativity, and there are these hybrid human aliens that are shapeshifters who are in all levels of government all over the world. I mean, when you get that level of fear going on, people are going to react, and in many cases they're going to be violent about it. That's why I think he's dangerous. Now, I was going to do a chart on David Icke, and thankfully I've changed my mind on that, because just recently, and this could have been the universe coming in to stop me, but very recently somebody did that to me without my permission. Somebody took my chart. I don't know how she got a hold of my chart, but she did. And she basically took real information from my chart and emasculated me in a very professional way. Now, if I didn't know anything about astrology, I wouldn't have cared, because I wouldn't know what I was looking at, but she did know what she was doing. And so this is why I say to astrologers, never, ever do a chart on anybody without their permission. And certainly never reveal it in public without their permission, because if you have real skill as an astrologer, you have real power. You have power to influence the choices that people make. And if you're not sharing that information with somebody in order to help them make choices that will make their life better, then you are potentially doing damage. It's like going into a doctor when you have some problem. Let's say you've got, a back problem or something like that, and you go into the doctor, and the doctor pulls out your X-ray or your MRI and says, you see right here, this is broken. You'll never be able to play sports again. You are going to be crippled forever. When you hear that from an expert who's using real information, it stops you and prevents you from potentially healing. As opposed to the doctor who comes and says, okay, so we do have an issue here, and that can be a challenge for you. So let's find ways to help you overcome that. Even if they don't have the answer, they're going to try and help you. And an astrologer should always come from that, because what ended up happening is basically, the things that she said about me were so debilitating to me. And it was coming from a woman. And it was all about how the feminine has abandoned me in this life. And here's your chart saying that at your age, you'll never have it again. It was very traumatic for me. And it's because I'm an astrologer and I know, oh, holy crap, she's right about that. She's right about that. She's right. Oh, maybe that's true. It was really, really harmful to me. So I'm never going to do an astrology reading on anybody alive ever again without their permission, and never without the intention of trying to help them. You can talk about dead people all you want, but nobody that's alive. So, I've done one on Donald Trump, and if I could go back in time, I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to beat myself up over it, because I'm sure he hasn't seen it and doesn't care. But I'll never do that again. I'm giving you this example because David Icke has that kind of power. There are people that blindly follow anything and everything he says, and because he is so convincing, he can give pseudo-facts and pseudo-science that the uneducated and people who are emotionally impaired, they're being emotionally driven to listen to him, will not do the work to analyze the information that's being given. So then you owe it to yourself to look at this guy. So again, I come back and I want you to take a look at your emotions surrounding everything that I've said. All I've said here is, here's this guy, look at it. And look at your feelings. Are you emotionally responding to what I'm saying? Do you feel the need right now? I haven't looked at the comments. I'm quite sure that there are. Do you feel the need to vehemently attack me personally because I'm questioning him? Because I'm analyzing his life? Because I'm analyzing the things that he's said? Because I'm showing you holes in his, the things that he's teaching? Do you have a strong emotional attachment to tear me down, to attack me, to try and defend him at my expense? Look at that. I honestly don't. I don't have an emotional attachment one way or the other. There was a time in my life, because I've been around for a while, so I in the 80s and 90s and things like that, I followed. In fact, I believed David Icke. I think I even had one of his books. I can't remember. But I remember looking at pictures of reptilians and all that, and putting together historical this. By the way, let's talk about the Anunnaki. Let's talk about David Sitchin, or Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin is the first guy who started talking about the Anunnaki, and that the Anunnaki were alien scientists. And let's start with, and as I said before, he has no credentials. He does not have any experience, he has not, learned anything about Sumerian language. So he doesn't have any credentials. And here he is translating. And, people who actually are trained in Sumerian have said that Zecharia Sitchin is nonsense. The stuff he says is nonsense. But bear in mind, that was back in 1976. In 1976, anybody could create a video or write a book and say this means this and that means that. And you had no way to verify that. We have the internet now, so people can actually go and learn Sumerian and look at what the words mean. And there are like dictionaries out there where you can translate, these things. So let's just take the word Anunnaki. Anunnaki, Zecharia Sitchin said, and by the way, David Icke has completely taken from Zecharia Sitchin and expanded on it. I mean, I'd go so far as to say he might even have hijacked it and made it his own. But there are other spiritual teachers out there who are doing the same. And to back up their evidence, they use Zecharia Sitchin as a source. They'll say Zecharia Sitchin translated it as blah, blah, blah. Zecharia Sitchin is not qualified. He does not know he did not know Sumerian. So just with Anunnaki, he said Anunnaki was those that descended from the heavens. And that's not what Anunnaki means. Anunnaki comes from the two gods, the sky god Anu, and the earth god Ki. The earth god Ki is feminine, the sky god is masculine. So Anunnaki are the children of An and Ki. They're the gods. That's it. It's just normal shamanism. It's the same shamanism that you find everywhere else in the world. The Sumerian mythology is just that. It's mythology that comes from shamanism, the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. And that the gods are simply the offspring of the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. The union of masculine and feminine. That's it. There's nothing in that word that says these are people who are descended from the heavens. He wrote his book, The 12th Planet, saying that these aliens came from Nibiru, and that Nibiru comes into our solar system every 36,000 years or 3,600 years or something like that. And he quotes from Sumerian mythology to back it up, except for the fact that Sumerian mythology says that Nibiru is a planet in the sky that you can see every day. So it completely contradicts whatever he says. But again, people take him, he wrote a book, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, he must be an expert. And they take that, and from then I want to find another thing. There was another guy here, I'm not going to be able to find it as quickly as I want, but he wanted to say that Zeus and Thor were Yahweh. And thinking that somebody wants to have a discussion about linguistics, I said, no, that's not accurate, because Yahweh is a Hebrew word, and Zeus and Thor are Indo-European, and you can't mix the two. And then he comes back and he says, no, dude, or whatever it was, the first language was Akkadian, which was then became Canaanite, which then became all other languages, including Indo-European. Therefore, and it's clear this is the kind of nonsense that people come to. They've been reading people like Zecharia Sitchin and others who hijack that information and then make further inaccurate, unscientific conclusions. And then you get your average Joe Blow who's uneducated, who buys into these things and then says, oh no, everything is based on this, and it's all, and Yahweh was the Akkadian, blah, blah. And so you got people who aren't even talking about reptilians or Anunnaki, and they're wanting to talk about the language of gods and things like that, and they have no idea. It gets further bastardized, and then somebody will say, oh yeah, and somebody will say something like that. Like, yeah, the first language was Akkadian, which then turned into Canaanite, which then turned into Indo-European, which then turned into all languages. And he thinks he knows what he's talking about because there's somebody who he sees as an expert because somebody else is quoting somebody else that's quoting Zecharia Sitchin. And David Icke has completely hybridized that. He's taken Chariots of the Gods, Zecharia Sitchin, and other things and created again his mythology based on his core mythology, which he revealed in that first interview, which was that he himself sees himself as the reincarnation of Jesus. He is a son of the Godhead, and that there is this good God, very Gnostic by the way, there's this good God that is full of love and light, and that then there's this bad black entity, and he has been controlling the world for 12,000 years, and he creates all the bad things in the world and feeds off of it. And David Icke is the messenger. He's hearing voices, he's doing automatic writing. There's other things like the Saturn moon matrix that he speaks of. He shares very openly where he came up with that idea, where one day he just had this feeling that the moon was hollow. That was it. He just had this feeling that the moon was hollow, and then because he is very intelligent and he's very articulate, he's then able to put together a theory of why that is, and people buy it and believe it and say he's proving it. He's got proof for it. But he's got an emotional agenda, and I think it comes from, and I'm analyzing him here, but based on what I've heard him say, it sounds like he has an unresolved childhood issue where either he was abused or he, maybe as a kid, he was bullied or something like that. And because of that, he represents himself as the good person that's going to fight for the victims. Now, and one last thing, because there's a lot of things about him. Remember, if you remember what I said in the beginning, David Icke was a member of the Green Party. He was working in politics. Back in late 1980s, he was working in politics. The Green Party would have been one of those promoting the idea that global warming is real. David Icke, from the beginning, even in his first interview, said he was protecting Mother Earth and the environment, and the reason why there was going to be all of these natural catastrophes is because the Earth was sick and that the Earth was going to respond in all of these horrible ways. He would have been the first one at that point in time to buy into the whole idea of global warming, the idea that the elite, being the rich people who run the oil companies, are spewing this stuff in the atmosphere, and it's causing all kinds of horrible things in the environment. But what I find ironic is that now, based on the latest I saw, I could be wrong, based on the latest I saw, he believes that global warming is a hoax. And that completely goes against his previous association with the Green Party. And the point I'm trying to make is that he's being very, in the beginning, he was very, just using whatever platform he could, I believe, to fight against, first it was fighting for the earth, which he felt as being a defenseless being, and he says so in so many words, that the earth is a defenseless entity that's being attacked by human beings. I don't have a problem with that. And his desire to champion children and to find everywhere that he can that all of them are attacking the children. So there's something up with him. I don't know what it is. That's my thought about him. Again, the bottom line is, it's really important to have critical thinking if you're going to believe anything. And I firmly believe that any teacher who presents themselves as anything other than human and or allows themselves to be seen as anything other than human is either somebody who is a charlatan or deluded or both. And you should never take anything anybody says at face value, especially if you are operating from your emotional need to feel that they are championing you. All right? So hopefully I've made my point. I know I've pissed off a lot of people, but it won't be the first time. Let me take a look and see if there are any questions, if there's anybody still here. Live streaming. All right, so there's going to be a lot. Bear in mind, this is a question and answer. I'm only going to respond to questions. Yeah, so Steve Borowski, this isn't a question, but I'm going to challenge you on this. He says his first writings were somewhat controversial because of alleged plagiarism. Not alleged. I mean, the guy's a plagiarist. Look, I'm okay with that. If he were to reference Zecharia Sitchin and others, I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with, I do it all the time. I reference authors, and that's not a problem. It's the fact that, he doesn't do that. And I think it's because he has definitely, this is my judgment on him, I'm being honest with you. I think he wants to be a celebrity, and he wants to be seen, and he wants to be seen as a spiritual channel. And so instead of, because if he were to say, I've been influenced by these writings and what those people say, then that sort of makes him more human. But if he just spouts it as though this is the truth that he has found to be true, without saying that, he sort of allows himself to be seen as the source of it, which again adds to his mystique and his power and all that. And, that's not unusual. That's not really a crime in and of itself, but it's not alleged. He's definitely pulling from other people. His research is not exactly always sound. I agree with you. I think his real contribution is just encouraging people to have open minds. I don't think he's encouraging people to have open minds. He makes very bold statements and does not back them up, and they're very inflammatory. I mean, to make the statements he has, which got him shut down, are very inflammatory unless you can prove it. And there's a lot of consequence. If he's wrong, there's a consequence of major damage. Again, saying that global warming is a hoax, that can be very damaging, because if it's real, if global warming is caused by humans, that's something that needs to be addressed. There is real consequences if we don't. It's not an either or, well, you can think whatever you want. There are consequences to it. If it's not true, it's not a big deal, but if it is true, then we need to do something about it. Same thing with COVID-19. If COVID-19 is a hoax, then the only thing that happens is maybe some people are inconvenienced and or some people lose their jobs. That's not nothing. But if it is something and people are saying it's a hoax, then people could die. That's a big deal. That is not an open mind. That does not encourage people to have an open mind. He's encouraging people to think uncritically. That is not the same as having an open mind. An open mind is saying, I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to look at the evidence. I'm willing to change my position. But in my experience, the vast majority of people who believe in reptilians and David Icke are completely, totally unwilling to look at anything, even if you give them the truth. Same thing with the flat earthers. You can give them all the proof you want, but because they've chosen to decide that it's a conspiracy, any evidence that doesn't promote their position is falsified. And they have no way to back that up. So he's not encouraging people to have open minds. He's encouraging people to operate from their childish narcissism, from their fear of being victimized. I don't agree with that. So Steve goes on to say he had some Gnostic spiritual experiences and balanced him badly. Let me respond to that. I've said in the past that David Icke is incomplete. There are some things that if you listen to what he says symbolically, you can learn from it. The Saturn-Moon matrix, for example. The Saturn-Moon matrix, as I understand it, is that beings that want to control and dominate you operate from Saturn. They send vibrations to the moon, which is hollow, and the moon then sends information to us and controls our thinking. Spiritually and energetically, there's some truth to that. Saturn is the planet of constriction. Saturn is the planet of karma. Karma is always going to be experienced as authorities. Every single chart that I've looked at of people who are conspiracy theorists have major Saturn issues. So they have major karmic issues that they're struggling with, and they feel the weight of their karma on them, which they experience as they're being victimized by people in authority. And in some cases, many of them have been, abused and come from, homes that have where they've been, controlled and dominated by controlling parents. And so they actually have that experience. And so they just take that and project it. When somebody says, it's not just your parents, it's the whole world, you're a victim, then they have this champion that they can emotionally latch onto, and then no matter what he says, they buy into it. But when you look at what he says, there's some truth in that. Saturn is karma, which will influence your mind. Your mind is the moon. The moon is hollow. So what he's saying, he doesn't realize it. But what he's saying is that in that moment, he came to realize that his mind was empty. He did not have the power in his mind to reflect the spirit, which is what the moon does. The moon reflects the sun. For him, what he was saying is that the power of Saturn, the power of karma in his life is so strong that he cannot access his mind. And therefore, the reptilian brainstem, which are the reptilians, are controlling and dominating him. So if you look at it that way, on a symbolic level, I am in complete agreement with him. But when you go and then take it literally, that's when it becomes a problem. Now, it wouldn't be that much of a problem if he was just this, this guy that just, this nut job or whatever. But he actually is, like I said, 4% of the population believe him implicitly. More than that, believe the idea that there's this faceless, nameless cabal of Illuminati overlords that are controlling your whole life. There are people that have control. The drug companies, there's huge cabal in there. The oil companies, huge. They are running the world. Who has an agenda? Who's most likely to have an agenda? The conspiracy to debunk global warming? Well, who's going to benefit from that? The oil companies. Who's going to benefit from a conspiracy to create a false global warming to say stop using oil? Who's going to monetarily benefit from that? Just use common sense. There are conspirators, but those very same conspirators that are controlling your life, that are taking away your freedom, are the very ones who are feeding you the fake news and the fake information that they can use so that you will help implement new laws, new policies, and new ideas into society so that they can get more control. You are being used by the very people you think you're fighting against. And that is a conspiracy in and of itself. It's a psyop. This is my main point. I am all for people wanting to point out the real conspiracies. But you've got to have critical thinking. If you don't have critical thinking, then you will be taken advantage of. You will be used by them. Okay, so again, none of these are questions. No, I don't see a question here, so I'm going to see if I can find a question. Yeah, oh, wow, interesting. I thought there was just going to be a ton of questions. I thought there was going to be a ton of people coming on to bag this, whatever. I guess not. Yeah, so Steve Borowski, I agree with you in essence. I agree that Icke's writings can be damaging to those who are unstable. This is Steve talking now. But I think it's important to present alternative viewpoints, whether or not that they are entirely critical. I disagree with that. Just throwing out, there should be free speech. Like I said, somebody could make the argument that, David Icke, should have the right to say whatever he wants. But I think it's also important to, analyze when somebody has that much power, can they go unchecked? Now, I've said this before. When I was a kid and I was watching television, there was a couple of things that were going on in the news that are not going on now. One of them was that if you were a reporter, and if you owned a newspaper, you were legally bound to prove your allegations. If you weren't, you could go to jail, be shut down, be sued, all kinds of things. There was real repercussions for not being able to back up your sources. And that's called journalism. Opinion piece. Now, they used to say opinion piece, the opinion at the end. Now, opinions are free. You're free to have your opinion, but it's clear that it's not journalism. It's clear, you make it clear that I don't have any evidence for this, this is just my opinion. And on television, when somebody had an opinion, political opinion, by law, there had to be somebody from the opposing party to sit there and give a counterpoint. That was the law. That law was rescinded by guess who? The conservative media. The conservative media went to the courts and got that law shut down. And guess what they do? They say whatever the hell they want. You know, Sean Hannity is very clear. If you ask him if he's a journalist, he's very vehement and says, I'm not a journalist. I'm an opinion commentator. Which means that he's legally saying that he can say whatever he wants. Don't take me to court, because it's just my opinion. But people, again, are uneducated. A lot of people, they're operating from emotional agendas, and they are being manipulated, and now they have places to go where they don't ever hear any counterpoint to anything that they hear. And so you have people who just have echo chambers, and they hear it long enough, and then they, do what the Pizzagate guy did. That's the danger. The danger is, I'm agreeing with you, but if you're going to have a platform where you have power to influence people's thoughts, behaviors, and actions on a large scale, then you need to be held accountable for what you say, and you need to be, you must be. I would make it a law. You must be able to back up your sources. So that's an open mind. An open mind is where you learn how to listen to both sides. You learn how to investigate both sides. That's an open mind. Just putting out some alternative theory or thought does not, in and of itself, promote alternative thinking. If David Icke, didn't make these kinds of statements about these kinds of things, he would, you know what I mean? We can talk about, whether or not Thor or Odin were real people, but if I start saying things that have the power to influence, the things that people do, and I'm not encouraging them to do, critical thinking and research, then I would be a dangerous person. I've already come to the conclusion that just being an astrologer makes me a dangerous person. Because after I've experienced that, I am never, like I said in the beginning, I'm never going to do another chart on anybody without their permission, and I will never reveal anything in public unless somebody is okay with it and it benefits them. And I'm never going to do a chart for somebody unless my motivation is to help them live a better life and be happier and to overcome their limitations. That's dangerous. If I were to do that, if I were to start doing that, again, I will never do it again on a celebrity that's alive. It's too dangerous. It's, astrologers have power. They have power to influence people's growth. So people who have power, people who have a platform, have to be accountable for what they say. And David Icke is not accountable. He's made predictions that never came true, and he hasn't once said anything about it. He hasn't taken any responsibility for anything he says or does. I think that I don't get that, again, I can't say, this is just my feeling. I don't know if he is a charlatan or not. I don't get the sense that he is. I think he's I think his feelings are very honest. I think he really feels those things, but I don't think he has any critical thinking. He doesn't have the ability or the desire to investigate his feelings from a critical standpoint. And I think he definitely wants a platform. He wants to be a celebrity. Again, I find it ironic that, the reptilians, anybody who has money and has power is a reptilian. And David Icke, who promotes this, is extremely popular, has been a celebrity his whole life, and he is very rich. and yet he's not a reptilian. The irony there is not lost on me. Mystical Oracle question. Since I had a same experience to David Icke and experienced a moment with a demonic force and sense of the female incarnation Jesus walked away from religion to my heritage being native, continued question, wanted to go deeper into shamanism. Could you explain this to better understand how I am able to do my psychic reading and connect to different levels that aren't visual to the human eye? So, Mystical Oracle. I think I passed by your thing early on. You had an experience where let me see here. I'm going to try and read what you said here. So one of the things that is working in your favor is that you acknowledge that you had this feeling and you haven't allowed it to completely control or dominate your experience. The other thing to look at is whether or not Jesus actually existed. Listen, there was a time, I remember when I was in Bible school, Bible college, I was an exorcist. And I definitely believed that demons do exist. And I was an exorcist. And I was going through a lot of issues where I felt I was being attacked by demons and I was having nightmares. And, you know, I was this spiritual warrior. And I got this feeling that I was this general who was the leader, like the Archangel Michael, and I was the leader of the heavenly army, and I was all alone on the front lines, and it was my responsibility to destroy evil. And I remember sharing it with a friend of mine, and he was looking at me like, have you thought that through? You know, it's sounding a little paranoid there. And, you know, to my credit, I went, yeah, that does kind of sound paranoid. But, you know, I had two visions of Jesus. One, which I've come to realize in the vision, that energy never once said it was Jesus. I put that on it, and I've come to find out it was my own soul that I experienced. It wasn't Jesus. But that was how I viewed things, so I chose to interpret it that way. And there was a time where I actually saw, if you and I were standing next to each other, I saw in the clouds this huge thunderhead, and it took on the shape of, I mean, you know, like the sun is hitting it, and you can see every hair in his beard and his eyes. I mean, it was like, and, you know, he must, because the cloud was huge, it must have been, I don't know, you know, thousands of feet in any direction. It was enormous. And I watched as this cloud went by, and the face of Jesus then went through the crucifixion, where I could see, like, you know, his face, you know, the crown of thorns, and, you know, the broken jaw and the tear in his beard, because they, you know, what they used to do, what Jews used to do, is they would take a stick and they would roll it up in your beard and they would pull off chunks of your face. That was one of the things that they did. You saw that come out in that, and then it morphed back into a perfect Jesus face, and then it disappeared. And then I heard this voice, and I had this thing, and I had this whole prophetic vision and all this kind of stuff, which if I were to explain it to you, you would have thought, oh my God, you saw Jesus. And here I am today saying that Jesus never existed. That Jesus is a completely fictional character. So just because you had an experience where you thought you saw Jesus, does that mean you saw Jesus? Does that mean Jesus talked to you? Does that mean you are the female reincarnation of Jesus? It's okay to have that feeling. It's okay to have that experience, but, you know, as a shaman, I have all kinds of experiences. As I said in the beginning of the video, I never, ever take anything that I feel at face value, ever. I always look to find some way to corroborate it in real life, in three-dimensional reality. Because I have an unconscious mind that's full of fears and full of anxieties and full of fantasies and full of narcissism and full of childish immaturity and all of that. And, you know, I can create all kinds of things. But a true spiritual, somebody who is enlightened is somebody who has all of their feelings and takes constructive action. So, if I had that experience again, that I was hit and I was this thing, and I would have to sit and go, is that feeling beneficial for the world? I don't think David Icke has that. I don't think David Icke sits around and wonders, are these feelings I have, are these coming from inside of me? What is the impact of this? He just has it and then spews it onto books and lectures, and he really, whether he consciously takes advantage of people's victim mentality or not isn't important. He is definitely, all of his money is coming from people who buy into the idea that they're helpless children and helpless victims. And that is the through line from the beginning. What happened to him, I don't know. Yeah, that's not factual. Ober AB chaos, that's not factual. The Sun, Schumann resonance, KP index, there's nothing factual about that. There are plenty of facts out there. You are being very, you're choosing, you're nitpicking, you are cherry picking your facts, because there's no shortage of facts that prove it. And you know that. You don't want to believe it. I don't know what your agenda is, but you don't want to believe it. And you're going to grab whatever you can, pseudoscience, to back it up. But there's no doubt in my mind, order ab chao, that you have, and I don't know you, but there's no doubt in my mind that you believe that you are being victimized, that you are being controlled, and that global warming is a hoax designed to somehow disempower you. If you come from that place, you're not going to find the facts. So there's no doubt in my mind that whatever it is you're trying to present isn't coming from a balanced research on your point. It's coming from an emotional desire to back up your victim mentality. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm willing for you to prove me wrong. Now you're accusing me of giving disinformation that I'm obviously not educated about. That's just not true. I am educated on it. I've researched it. I've researched both sides. I don't agree with you. But again, that's the childish vantage point. The childish vantage point is to say, you don't agree with me, therefore you don't know what you're talking about. Or the same thing I get when people say, you haven't done your research. Because to them, if I had done research, I would come to the same conclusion as them. Which means that they want me to only research the information that they provide. And you're coming from that same place. At least it sounds like it. Mystical Kevin R. asked me, do you believe in extraterrestrials? Please write the word question so I can see it's a question. I haven't made up my mind. I am very open to it. The only person so far who, and I haven't heard him recently, but Whitley Strieber. If you want to go see somebody talk intelligently about aliens and alien abductions and that kind of thing. I don't. Is he still alive? I wonder if he's still alive. Whitley Strieber. He was the author of a book called Communion. There was a movie made about it way back in the 90s. He's the only guy that I look to. I consider him a critical thinker, and he was somebody who claims to have had multiple abduction scenarios, and he was a real skeptic about it, and anyway, it's real interesting. So my mind is very open about it. I've had a couple of experiences when I was doing spirit fighting, which I don't talk about that as much as I used to, but it's really intense. If you talk about going to other dimensions and changing your and having all kinds of powers and all that kind of stuff. When I was doing that, I remember waking up one morning not knowing if I had had a dream or if I had had a waking experience where I was in my room, and on the other side of my door I saw a gray stick his head out and look at me. And it felt very real. But it was also around that same time that I was reading Communion, and that's one of the things in the movie that's an iconic thing. A gray peeks his head around from behind the doorway. I watched a movie called Fire in the Sky. I don't know if you've ever seen it, about alien abduction. And I went through a really traumatic experience because when I saw it, it was like I had these deja vu experiences of having gone through it. But as it turns out, that scene in that movie was written in there. That didn't happen. So, I mean, I've had enough experiences to make me wonder, but at the same time, I also have this unconscious mind. So I can't say yes or no. I'm totally open to the idea. I like Whitley Strieber's take on it, which is he says that aliens are actually humans from the future who have come back in time to try and correct a mistake that happened, which actually split the human race into two, and there was all these disasters, and that they're from so far in the future, and they're so different, and their brains have evolved to such an extent that they're basically in another dimension, and it is so traumatic for us that we can't experience it without being in horror. But that's not their intent. Their intent is to actually change human DNA to avoid a potential disaster that's coming. So I like that idea. Of course, it's so freaking out there, there's no way to prove it. But the way he presents it, I like that. If I were to believe in aliens, I would believe along those lines. By the way, I think SETI is ridiculous. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They have radio arrays trying to pick up radio signals. I'll tell you why I think it's ridiculous. Because it starts from an assumption. It starts from an assumption that any advanced race is going to use radio waves. It's pure projection. It's just so, it's just so full of itself to think that, it's not even that. It's like, we learned radio waves, so they're going to use radio waves to communicate. We have no idea they could be so totally different from us and operate on such a completely different level that, there's no way. I think that's such a waste of time and money to try and look for radio waves. It's just so narcissistic to think that they're going to be like us. It's like watching Star Trek. Interesting thing about all of the aliens in Star Trek is that they're all two-legged, bipedal, hominid humanoids who speak perfect English, except for the fact that maybe they have blue skin or they have a big ridge on their forehead or something. But they're exactly like humans in every other way. It's just so narcissistic. Anyway. So getting back to mystical oracle question. So being a non-believer went from religion to non-believer. Is that normal to go to that end of the spectrum but still experience spiritual? I don't know. Who cares if it's normal? Is that your experience? That's your experience. Allow yourself to have it. I don't know that it's normal or abnormal. It's just your experience. So Order Abkeo, why are you even here? It's okay with me that you disagree with me, but I'm not hearing you say anything that tells me that you are operating from critical thinking, that you have investigated it from a non-emotionally stimulated place. I don't know you, but you can prove me wrong. Tell me, am I wrong? Do you believe that we are all victims of a big conspiracy to keep us in the dark? Do you believe that the government and that the Illuminati and that reptoid aliens are keeping you trapped in a matrix to feed off of your soul? If you can prove to me that you don't believe that, I will give you more credence. Not that anything I just said is necessarily untrue. It's just that there's such an emotional attachment to that all of the other conclusions that you're coming to, which you're trying to bring you're trying to bring scientific proof. You haven't proved to me that you are able to do that from a place of critical thinking. In fact, that you want to attack me personally shows that you've got an emotional attachment from that. I don't have anything against David Icke, and I'm not against anything he says. like I said, I was open to it and even followed it for a long time. So I'm not coming from a place where I want to destroy him or even silence him. I am actually just giving, hey, have we stopped to think about what this guy is saying, and have we stopped to think about the potential effect that he will have on the world by people just simply taking what he says at face value? I think I'm saying let's analyze this. If I'm wrong, I haven't harmed anybody. If David Icke is wrong, he potentially can hurt a lot of people. And so can you. If you honestly believe that there is no such thing as global warming, especially if you believe that it's a hoax, and global warming actually turns out to be caused by humans, you are doing damage to every single living being on the planet. That is a real possibility. But you have to be willing to honestly look and see if you're wrong. You're not. I don't get that. You think it doesn't mean anything. So you're not convincing me of anything other than that I don't think you're coming from a place of critical thinking at all. You had a question? Well, write it again. I didn't see it. Again, this is why. I mean, you threw out a bunch of opinions, and I tend to go past those because I want to answer people's questions. If you have an honest question for me that's not like a rhetorical question to try and back me in a corner to, get into an argument with me, I'll answer it. If you have an honest question for me, I'll answer it. All right, so let's see. Steve Borowski. Okay. Again, that's not a question. No other questions? The beings he encountered cloaked themselves as aliens from bad sci-fi movies from the 50s. Mm-hmm. By the way, there was one guy who claimed to be an alien communicator, and he made this really convincing video that was actually frightening. It frightened me. Because again, there's something about the face of those grays and the insect movement, the way that they're supposedly moved like insects. There was something about that I just find I have a visceral reaction to. It's very frightening. And he made this video of from his window. He was talking about the lights and the aliens, and he's got his camcorder and he shows the window, and up comes the head of this gray, and it pokes itself and it comes down, and I went, and then somebody caught him. He made another video, and I can't remember what it was, but somebody caught him in the video falsifying something, and then his explanation for it was just ridiculous. And then somebody said, "Here, I'll show you how he did it," and went to some costume shop or whatever and got like an alien head and put it on a stick and just put it up in front of the window and did that. And I went, oh yeah, that works really well. We're so easily convinced. We're so easily duped by our fears. I mean, I wanted to believe that guy's video was real until somebody did the exact same thing. I don't know. What is plasma cosmology? You would like to give me information. Well, it's great that you want to give me information, but if you are somebody who's here to teach, people need to ask you. Giving me information, providing, if you're trying to be kind about it, it's great, but I haven't asked you for your help. I haven't asked you to teach me. You should be finding people who want to learn from you. And you should charge the money so that you can be a safe conduit for that. You can't prove absolutely I can prove it concerning global warming if that's what you're asking. Dude, you can't. You may have science, you may have pseudoscience, but you can't do it. It's already been proven. It's already been proven. Very simple. It's been done already. It's dead, it's over. It's like the flat earth. There are plenty of people who want to prove flat earth. They can't do it. It's a dead issue. It's done. It's over. You can say that all you want. I already know that it's pseudoscience. Yeah, you've questioned it and analyzed the data for over 15 years. Good for you. I still don't know that you're free from emotional agenda. You haven't proven that to me. And I don't know what plasma cosmology is. That sounds, I don't even know what that is. It doesn't sound like science. It might be an interesting spiritual thing, but it doesn't sound like science. I mean, I'm an expert, well, I'm not an expert compared to some of the masters, but I am very well versed in spirit fighting. I am an exorcist. That doesn't mean I'm going to go try and prove it scientifically, because you can't. It's impossible. So I'd be really interested to know what plasma cosmology is. I mean, look, I don't know you, but it's going to be very hard for you to get any kind of feeling from me that you are not coming from an emotional agenda and that you're nitpicking information in order to justify it. Listen, nobody would want global warming to be a hoax more than me. Nobody. I have no interest in that being the case. I also have no interest, and nobody would be happier than me to find out that COVID-19 wasn't a threat. Nobody would be more happy than me. I don't have an emotional agenda. The facts convince me otherwise. I don't get that sense about you at all. Yeah, so Order, I don't need you to do a YouTube response or email you. I have no interest in getting in that discussion with you. I've done more than 15 years of research, and the book is closed for me. So I'm glad that you want to prove it. Go prove it to people who want to hear it. I think it's dangerous, and I don't believe that you're a critical thinker. That's a judgment. I could be wrong, but I'm just not interested. Astrology isn't a pseudoscience. It's not a physical science at all, universal mind. Astronomy is a physical science. Astrology is not a physical science. And I agree with you. You can't take astrology into court. You can't take it into the laboratory. You can't put it in textbooks. It has turned out to be, perhaps coincidentally, a very accurate way to determine all kinds of things about a person's life and their personality. I'm totally okay. I have no attachment. If somebody can prove to me that astrology is false, I will have no problem getting rid of it. And I would never try to use astrology in any kind of way to prove things like global warming or aliens or anything like that. So, I mean, I'm glad that I don't know what your point is, but you're not scoring any points here. I'm in full agreement with you. It should only be used for self-empowerment and entertainment. Outside of that, it doesn't have any uses in the real world. Mystical Oracle question. Everything I see it like, know how it done and can't stand fake people or fake situations. Is that my other self? That's not a question. I don't know what you're asking. Of course, AbKO. Of course. My basic thing is that if if something is wrong by someone speaking on a topic, conversely, you could be wrong. That's obvious. That's self-evident. That's the difference between me and David Icke. I'm not coming here saying I am the son of the Godhead and that I have seen this and I have seen that. Everything that I do say about that is only taught in ways like the Hool breath. It's a practice that you do that if it helps you, go do it. But I never have and never will take anything that I teach and try and use it to explain viruses or anything else. Even if I say things like the COVID virus is a manifestation of our collective unconscious, that doesn't mean that it's not really there and that people aren't really dying from it. So your argument isn't going anywhere, pal. Come on, man. Be smarter than that. Do you not see that my focus here is to help people? I have no agenda. I don't care if people believe or disbelieve me. I have no interest in, I don't care. I don't care if I never have a following or anything for the rest of my life. In fact, if it were up to me, I would just simply be, just have millions of dollars and just surf all day. I would stay off of the internet. I would do nothing. I would just surf. I do this because this is how I've chosen to make a living. But I understand the responsibility that comes with being a spiritual teacher. And I know the difference between teaching something spiritually and doing something to have an effect on things like laws and politics and public behavior. I'm well aware of that. So your arguments that you're trying to point at me aren't working. And why are you still here? Why are you still on my channel? Why are you still talking with me right now? I could be wrong, but I think you may want to learn something from me. There may be a part of you that knows that what I'm saying might be the truth, and that you might actually want to have more of an open mind and get past your emotional attachment and your emotional agenda to the conspiracy theories so you can actually see the truth. You can determine that. I think that's why you're listening to me. I could be wrong. Question, how to know you had a death of ego or spiritual death? Why do you need to know that? You're putting a lot of emphasis on that as though it means something. We all have spiritual deaths and deaths of ego all the time, and we go through it and we also dive into our ego and dive into our narcissism. I mean, it's a balance. There's always ups and downs. I go through it all the time. That's why I said I'm not enlightened. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an enlightened person. Because an enlightened person is somebody who never makes a mistake and never has a human moment. I have them all the time. And I've had many spiritual awakenings and many deaths of ego, and I've learned and grown and all of that. But it's not that important. You're putting too much importance on it. It's just part of being human. The most spiritual thing any of us can be is human. That's the best we get. And we're supposed to be that. Again, enlightenment, my definition of enlightenment is being fully conscious of all of your positive and negative feelings, and then having the ability to take conscious action, even if it's diametrically opposed to your emotions and your instincts. That's also critical thinking. That is the ultimate achievement of enlightenment. That's it. We never stop being human, in my opinion. Robert Seaman, question. While practicing Hool breath, have you noticed different results based on surroundings, such as different elements, such as in a body of water or around a fire? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but, the Hool breath is an earth breath. So you're connecting energetically to the earth. So a lake sits on top of the earth. An ocean sits on top of the earth. Fire sits on top of the earth. So it doesn't mean, I'm open to that. I haven't experimented with that, but the earth is the dominant feature, and that's what you're tapping into, to answer your question. That's my take on it. And listen, I didn't invent it. I think I transmitted it. So you use it and you tell me. Maybe you'll come up with a whole different technique that has been given just for you. Question, Balder and Hela's relationship, what do you think? I don't know what you're asking. What do you think? Balder is a representation of the soul. Balder going into the underworld represents the soul being encased in human flesh under the earth. And Hela is the unconscious mind, is the underworld. So the relationship is that Balder is in the underworld. I don't know if you're asking, are they dating? I don't know what you mean by relationship. So that's my take on it. All right, so I don't see any more questions. I got to do some business, pay the bills. So lockdown.thunderwizard.com. $3,214 savings. What I've done, because a lot of people are in lockdown, is, here it is, that the lockdown, oh no. Because we are in lockdown and people are stuck at home, what I've done is I've taken every single service, not every single service, sorry, every single video teaching and every single video certification, every single video course, and I am giving it away for free. The only thing that you're paying for are 5 personal services with me, which you get via Skype, which last anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And outside of that, you're getting $3,214 worth of stuff. Go to lockdown.thunderwizard.com to learn more about that and take advantage of it. When things get back to normal, which they will, when things get back to normal, I will get rid of that and we'll go back to, if you want all those things, you're going to have to come out of pocket $3,200 and whatever. Thunderwizard.com, that is my subscription site. You can go there and learn Mastery of Shamanism. You can subscribe there for $25 a month. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. It's only cost you $25. I don't even know how many thousands of hours you get of in-depth teaching that you don't get here on this channel. And there's the Manifestation Mastery course, which you can subscribe to as well, where I go into depth about how to intend and create your own reality, where we look at the incomplete information about the law of attraction as opposed to the law of manifestation. I've proven this with my life. I'm continuing to prove it. You can go there and subscribe there. Again, if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. It'll be pretty much the price of buying a coffee every day for a month. So you don't have the money, then just don't drink coffee for a month and pay for it. If you don't like it, unsubscribe. Big deal. Courses.thunderwizard.com, that has all of my books, my DVDs, everything is there in one spot, all of the links to all of the services and books and everything. Of course, subscribe and hit the bell button. All right, that's it. I hope I've tried to give a good, what's the word? I've tried to give a good balanced take on this. My take on this is that I do believe that David Icke's information, I believe, is potentially harmful because it promotes a victim mentality. I don't have a huge feeling about that. I have a very strong feeling that when he makes blanket statements, that his followers will take and can affect potentially people's lives, like that COVID-19 is a hoax. I think that has the potential of causing a lot of damage. And I believe that people buying into global warming being a hoax without investigating it can also cause damage, because again, if that's wrong, then the people who are promoting the hoax that global warming is a hoax, the people who are making money off of that and destroying the environment, if I'm right, continue to do that from the consent of people who don't know why they believe what they believe. And I think that's potentially dangerous. And so you should really take a look at this guy and what he's saying, and really take a look at your emotional attachment to what he says or doesn't say. All right, so that's it for me. Order Abkeo. We're just going to agree to disagree. Listen, I am convinced. I am convinced that global warming is real and it's caused by humans. And I just don't believe that you're getting your information from credible sources. And I don't believe that you don't have an emotional agenda. I don't believe it. Call that a judgment all you want. But yeah, I'm not interested in debating it with you. My mind is made up on this. And this channel isn't about that, because I could go but the thing is that if you don't believe it, I could make this a channel about debunking the flat earth conspiracy too. But the thing is, if people have an emotional attachment to that belief, it won't matter what proof you give them. It won't matter. I don't think it'll matter to you if I give you the proof. That's really not what I want to do. So, and no, I'm not interested in having that. And that's not really the focus of my channel. It's just my opinion. Take it or leave it. All right, so that's it for me. All right, I'm going to call it a day. And it's noon. Wow. I didn't go surfing today because I'm still physically recovering from surfing that I did last week, so it's kind of a bummer for me. So anyway, maybe we'll get some more work done, maybe get some more videos up, that kind of thing. Anyway, thanks guys for showing up, and that's it. Talk to you guys later.